All right, guys, welcome back to Social Studies. Now, I know this is Wednesday, but this is our first direct instruction day, so I hope you guys had an excellent break. I hope you guys are refreshed and rested and ready to get back to Europe. So, in this case, before we jump into looking at European governments, which will be the next video, I want to focus on some of the vocabulary that deals with governments. Now, normally we don't do a video on vocabulary because the vocabulary is always in the lessons, but I felt with some of the words that we're going to be looking at for this week, it was necessary to do a little video to help you guys out. So hopefully this will be a short video, but let's get to our vocabulary words for this week. Okay, first of all, there are 8 words. Normally we have 6 or 7, so there's 8 words this week, but we're looking at 2 groups of 3, and then we'll look at the other 2. But it's important to look at 2 groups of 3 because those groups are answering certain questions. So let's take a look. Actually, you know what? I was about to slide this screen, but it's not PowerPoint, so it's Smartboard. Well, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. Now, our first set of words: autocratic, oligarchic, democratic. Now, first of all, you should notice that they all end in IC, and if you have a word that ends in IC, it's describing something. So these aren't governments. So think about the governments. If you look at the earlier videos that I did, you'll notice when I talk about governments, I remember we talked about representative democracy, parliamentary democracy, absolute monarchy, constitutional monarchy, totalitarianism, and fascism. These are not governments. With that IC word, with that IC suffix, what these words are doing, they're describing how many people rule in government, in one of the government types that we were talking about. So you may have a parliamentary democracy, and I might ask, okay, well, how many people rule in a parliamentary democracy? And you go, well, hey, it's democratic. All right, that's pretty easy because obviously parliamentary democracy, democratic. But if I have an absolute monarchy, I would still need to ask myself the question, okay, well, how many people rule in an absolute monarchy? Well, these words describe the number of people that rule. In this case, by the way, an absolute monarchy, it's autocratic. All right? So we're going to go through what these words mean. But first of all, just for you, this is a note. Let's make sure that we have this and we go, okay, what do all 3 of these words describe? Well, they're describing how many people rule. That's going to be very important for us to remember. How many people rule? If we can keep that in mind, that's really going to help us. All right? So how many people rule? Kind of weird looking M, but you get the point. Autocratic. Now, I don't have time. It's kind of boring to have me write it down on screen, so you can play this back if you need to. Autocratic. Rule by one person. So if you think about it, totalitarian governments, fascist governments are run by dictators. It's ruled by one person. Absolute monarchy, where the monarch has absolute power, whatever they say becomes law. One person rules. Autocratic. And you always think of autocratic, I like to think of the word automatic. Right? If it's only me ruling, and I don't have to answer to anyone, and there's no one voting me in, and I have all the power, hey, then what I say is automatic. But you can only have that if it's one person ruling. Okay? So autocratic, ruled by one person. Oligarchic. All right? Oligarchic is a term that most students your age have not heard. Oligarchic means ruled by a small group of people. Now, keep that in mind. When I say small group of people, I don't mean a group of people who are really small. I mean ruled by a small group. So let's say the entire country is ruled by 5, 10, 15 people. That's a small group. So oligarchic, ruled by a small group. In 6th grade, we don't really do any countries that are oligarchic, but in 7th grade, you guys will study the country of Iran. And Iran has a theocratic government. We don't even talk about theocracy in 6th grade. But if you ask how many people rule in this theocratic government, if you're looking at Iran, you notice that Iran has a small group of religious leaders that have all the power. They can veto any laws that are passed. They can put new rules into place. They're actually responsible for who's even allowed to run for president in Iran. All right? That's ruled by a small group of people. So that's oligarchic. So oligarchic, ruled by a small group. Democratic is the easiest. You can just say rule by all. Some people will say that. Listen, it's a lot easier to just stick with democracy. So rule by the people. Okay? So how many people rule? All the people. All the citizens of the country. So democratic, rule by the people. Autocratic, rule by one. Oligarchic, rule by a small group. Democratic, rule by the people. All right? Let's go to the next set of vocab words. This is why I want to do these, because you notice we have this group of three, and a lot of these words you haven't seen before. Now, these three answer the question, how is power shared? Now, if you're asking, well, that's weird. What do you mean, how is power shared? I want you to think of it like this. Let's think about the United States. What is the central government of the United States? In other words, what is the government that has power over the entire country? When a law is passed in that government, it affects the entire country. Well, if you said Washington, D.C., okay, you're correct. Washington, D.C. is the central government of the United States. But think about it. Don't we also have local governments? Doesn't Georgia, the state that we're in right now, doesn't Georgia have the state government of Atlanta? And that government in Atlanta can pass laws. And by the way, the state government is located in Atlanta. The state government is in Atlanta itself. But we have our state government in Georgia is located in the capital city, Atlanta. And when they pass a law in Atlanta, it affects only the state of Georgia, correct? Well, think about it. You've got 50 states who each have their own state government. And that's not even talking about the different counties that some have mayors, some have county, this is the best way to put it. If it's not a mayor, normally you have a small, kind of like this ruling council in each county. That's not even counting all those little kind of smaller governments. Well, think about it. You have to have some rules in place because otherwise Washington, D.C. is going to start to come into conflict with the state government in Atlanta, and if you went to like the capital of Florida's Tallahassee, the state government in Tallahassee, you're going to have all this conflict and nobody's going to know, okay, well, wait a second. Who has power? Is it you? Is it Washington, D.C.? Is it the state governments like Atlanta? Well, which one has power? How do we do this? Well, that's where we talk about how power is shared. I think I messed that up in how I pronounced it, but that's where we talk about how power is shared. So we're going to go through these, all right? So first of all, let's make our little note right here. If Mr. McGee could remember to make sure to do the board with the pen. So these three answer the question, how is power shared? Now think about it. Again, if you don't know how power is shared, you're going to be in trouble because you're going to have war between the central government that controls the entire country and the smaller local governments. So how is power shared? Now, so if I move out of the way so you guys can see that, how is power shared? So let's think about this for a second. We have the central government. So we use the United States, but let's take Germany, for instance. We use Germany a lot with our geography. So the capital of Germany is Berlin. Berlin is the central government of Germany. Whatever law is passed in Berlin affects the entire country of Germany. But yet Germany is broken down into individual states. And those states have some power. So how is power shared? Does the central government have all the power? Does the local government have all the power? Do they share power? Well, these words help us to figure that out. So unitary. If you ever see the word unitary, when we're talking about a country and we're looking at their government, unitary means all power is with the central government. All right? So that means that if the United States were unitary, if we said, okay, how is power shared? And we said, oh, it's shared in a unitary way, that would mean all power is with Washington, D.C., and the states have no power. Now, luckily, that's not the case, but I'm giving you an example of what unitary would look like. All right? Confederation. Confederation is the opposite of unitary. If in a unitary way of sharing, all power is with the central government, then in a confederation, all power is with the local governments. So that would mean that if the U.S. were a confederation, then all power would be with the states, with their local governments. So Georgia's state government is located in Atlanta. All power would be with Georgia and Florida, and there'd be no power in Washington, D.C. That's not how it is, but I'm giving you that example. If the U.S. were a confederation, that's what it would look like. Now, that would be kind of a problem. When you get to high school, you guys will actually learn about the Articles of Confederation. The United States, actually, once we won the Revolutionary War, the Founding Fathers, in trying to stay away from having a dictator, having a king, they went too far. They made the United States a confederation and almost destroyed the United States. They had to come back and write the Constitution. Now, federal is the Goldilocks here. Federal is, you think about it, you had Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and the bear's father, Mr. McGee, needs to go back and actually read some of these stories because it's been a while because he's not a kid anymore. All right, but if you remember, you were talking about the father's porridge was too cold, I think. The mother's porridge was too hot, but the baby's porridge was just right. If we're talking about Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Well, federal is the balance between these two. All right, don't make fun of me for my terrible fairy tale references. All right, so federal is where power is shared between the central government and the state governments. And here in the U.S., that's actually what we have. We have a federal system. So when you hear someone talk about a federal system, what they mean is the central government, so in this case, in our country, Washington, D.C., has certain powers, and the states have certain powers. And so power is shared. Instead of having all power with the central government, unitary, or all power with the local governments, confederation, they share power. Central government gets some powers, local government gets some powers. So those are the three right there. This is why I want to go over them because, again, a lot of students have not seen these words before, and we need to know about these before we go on, okay, into governments of Europe or governments in Latin America or the government of Canada or the government of Australia. All right, now, luckily you're thinking, oh no, is there another block of three? Remember I said that there's 8, so we've already done 6 words, so that means that, guess what? I put 2 in here just to make it easy for you, okay? So if you're thinking, well, I haven't heard these words, how easy can they be? They're pretty easy, all right? Chancellor, that is the title given to the leader of Germany. So if you think about it, in the U.S., president is the title of the leader of the country of the United States. Chancellor is the title of the leader of Germany, okay? That's what you do. You just have to remember that. Hey, what is the name of the leader of Germany? Well, the title of the leader is Chancellor. Okay? Prime Minister is your other word. So Prime Minister, in a parliamentary democracy, the leader of the country is normally called a Prime Minister. So see, I gave you 2 easy ones to help you out. The title for the leader of Germany is Chancellor. In a parliamentary democracy, normally, the leader of a parliamentary democracy is called the Prime Minister. All right? Go back, look at those if you need to. Of course, since this is Wednesday, I will be on conference if you have any questions. All right, take care, guys.